Hello, everybody, and welcome. People will be, continuing to come in, but I'll get started so that we make sure we have time for questions at the end. Um, my name is Gigi McGee, and I'm joined here by Bernardo Margolis of AIGA Philadelphia, and of course, our guest, Gustavo Piqueira. So, on behalf of Moore College of Art and Design and AIGA Philadelphia, I proudly present our first virtual lunchtime lecture. Brazilian designer Gustavo Piqueira will share his insight on the intersection of visual narrative, culture, and language. As the principal of Casa Rex, Gustavo has received over 500 international graphic design awards spanning 3 continents: South America, North America, and Europe. His wide field of work is a reflection of the way he views design as a dialogue. To his way of thinking, the more dialogue there is, the richer the professional experience becomes. As a result of this approach, we witness not only his transition across all areas of graphic design, but also his ability to remove the typical boundaries and confines usually inherent within the profession. His creativity is expanded through illustrations, objects, typography, and it culminates in his 40 published books, all signified by a blend of history, art, and literature. It is our pleasure to introduce you to the work and thinking of Gustavo Piqueira. Please join me in welcoming him to Philadelphia. But before we begin, please mute yourself, put any questions in the Q&A. We'll get to whatever questions we can and hope that we can answer as many as possible. We hope you enjoyed the lecture, and Gustavo, take it away.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Gigi. Hello to everyone. I'm starting the presentation with the image you have chosen to use to promote the lecture. So it's a set of illustrations. I have designed it for a children's book. As Gigi just said, I am a graphic designer from São Paulo, Brazil. I've been a graphic designer since I graduated from school 25 years ago and opened my studio, Rex. After 10 years, it was started to be called Casa Rex. I have a few warnings before I start. The first one is that I apologize in advance for any possible misspelling or English mistake. I hope you understand that. Second, I usually talk too much. I usually ask for 4 hours for a lecture. And so I try to shrink into 1 hour. Hopefully it will work. And worse than that, usually as I have 4 hours, my first 15 minutes, I don't know why, but they never make any sense. So for every lecture I give, the first 15 minutes, I start talking things that even I don't know why I'm talking them. I'm saying that. Hopefully, as we just have 1 hour, hopefully I will try to squeeze it to like 5 minutes. But maybe it won't work and we will have 50 minutes of nonsense talking and just 45 minutes of something useful. Hopefully the 45 minutes will work, the 50 minutes. So I am a graphic designer. I work as a graphic designer, started as a small studio just after graduating from school. And the studio, and I only worked with graphic design, never did anything apart from graphic design, but tried to work within all areas of the activity. So I've designed books and packaging and brand identities and for multiple kinds of clients. And the studio had, since it was founded, it had grown a lot. And in 2010, I opened a branch in London. And 2000, and I had like 55 to 60 people working for like multinational companies. And 2 years ago, I realized it wasn't like working anymore. And I stopped doing some like bigger projects and moved it to a smaller place, to a smaller team. And now I work only with very specific projects. But so I work. This is the children book. Like very, you have used it in the promotion. I will talk just a little about it. It's a children's book that I received it as they were poems. Each poem was describing a weird imaginary animal, and I was asked to illustrate it. And I thought that I would like ruin the book if I did it, because for me the play for children would be read the description, the written description of the animal, and create with its own repertoire, its own mind, the image of the weird animal. So I proposed to the publishing house to make it differently. I wouldn't illustrate the poems. I would create my visual weird animals. So the reader, the young reader, could either create images of the written weird animals he or she read, or try to describe verbally the images of the other weird animals he reads. So I've created this. And I do some illustrations for other books. This is about a football book, a book about football using old newspapers. This is another book. This is a packaging for a coffee shop in São Paulo here. Another packaging for a different coffee producer. This is a packaging designed for a tucupi, which is a sauce from Amazonia, a typical sauce from Amazonia. This is chocolate packaging, brand identity for a coffee shop, brand identity for a beauty platform, a beauty channel, for an art exhibition here in São Paulo about Paris. This is for my masterpiece in typography, like an opening, a summary for a publication. We designed some posters as well. This is a commercial posters. We also produce some posters here. We have a small printing workshop within the studio. So we produce some posters, non-commissioned posters. I do book covers as well. This is another book cover which was printed using a rock. So it's called the rock in Portuguese. A pedra is the rock. Another book cover, manually printed. And this is another book I designed. But I usually do not, I'm talking quickly about these projects, not entering into the details on them, because I usually do not talk about what I call the regular graphic design projects I develop. I still develop graphic design projects, even if not for all clients, just for local clients. But I usually do not talk about them because I prefer to focus on the aspect of my work where I try to use graphic design, not the usual way. What is the usual way? The usual way is someone commissions me to develop a graphic design project. Say, okay, I am a company, a book, a product, and I want you to please design me. And because I'm trying to find new ways of using graphic design as an activity. I believe that the regular activity for me is not enough anymore. So I'm trying to use it in new ways, mixing with different languages, broadening what I see as visual culture, and putting everything together in books, usually in books. usually books that people, when I present to a designer's audience, someone asks, the first question is, okay, but this is not graphic design, but it's okay for me. I'm used to it. So if you ask it again, it won't be an issue. But that's what interests me. So I will show a few of these projects. This project, I've picked an old typographical cliche, catalog of cliches. I don't know the Brazilian from Brazil. I don't know exactly. They don't. It doesn't have the date exactly, but I guess it was from the 1920. And I created a book using only images from this catalog to tell to play that. It's a word play with the cliche meaning. So you have the typographical cliche and the cliche meaning, like telling all the Brazilian cliches. On the cover, you have the biggest of Brazilian cliches, which is the three races that together make Brazil. Uh, so I've created a visual narrative telling the story of Brazil, past and present. So that's past. And then the Portuguese arrived, bringing civilization and civilization. So, and then it's moved to the present. So we have the traffic, urban life, and carnival, and debts. Lots of debts. So the book is a visual narrative, only visual narrative that plays with not only with it's not only a word play, but plays with the past and present of the visual culture. So we use like old tools to create new stories. This is a simple project. So it's basically a picture book, no words, a simple idea. This is a bit more complex. This is, and probably will be harder for me to explain. This is the first book printed about Brazil. This is in 1554. And there were like 54 woodcuts. And they are not the first woodcuts about Brazil, but are the first set of woodcuts showing Brazil to an European audience. And I was looking at its original and saying, okay, it's like you have like the native Indians hut, and you have like the cannibalism, the usual ways in Brazil. But I was looking at this image specifically, which comes from, and these images are the images that we see in our books about Brazilian history. So they are the image that founded Brazil in a way or another. And this image particularly was the image that was the trigger for me to produce the research and the book. It's from the second book representing Brazil. It's a sloth. And for me, it has always been a bad designer issue. Because for me, it's clearly a bad designer interpreting a briefing. So the briefing, probably which was oral briefing, describing the sloth. And if you describe it verbally, it's a sloth, because you say, oh, okay, it's a big, hairy, furry animal, a mammal, with a children's face. It's a sloth. And the designer, the illustrator, say, okay, I got it. Big, fat mammal, furry, with a children's face, and executed literally a children's face. So this weird animal, for me, it has for years, I always consider it as bad execution, nothing more than that. And thinking about it, I realized that the first image of Brazil and of the new, what they call the New World, were produced almost at the same time than the printing, the printing culture was spreading. Like when Gutenberg printed his Bible in 1455, Columbus arrived in República Dominicana in 1492. So they were almost together. And then I thought, oh, probably they were more related than I can usually find in books here, telling about how this image of Brazil was created. So I started to look for other editions of this first book, which is the narrative by a German guy that was be held captive by Tupinamba Indians for 9 months, and then returned to German and 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 wrote the book. So I started to look for other editions of the same book, and then I still have some more image of the sloth. The sloth. This is the first sloth representation. Then on the third book of Brazil, which was created by a French Protestant guy, Jean de Lery, he he added in his book this image of like a Satan beach party, a kind of Satan beach party. So it's like a beach with lots of devils playing around, and included, you can see the sloth on the left side, same sloth. And then in 1592, when Theodore de Brie made a big collection of these travel narratives, including those from the US, and created these images, not in woodcuts, because those were woodcuts from early woodcuts, not using uh, uh, bronze matrices. He included the sloth you can see in the middle, side by side with a very weird bird with wings like a devilish. And then the guy who colored has had no doubts that the sloth belongs to Satan, to the and painted his eyes like flaming red. I remember this is the sloth. So this distortions for me, they were created not only by colonialism or but also be, by the way books and graphics were produced at the time. So I started to research for it, and then moving back to the first book, I started to look for other editions where I could find illustrations of Brazil showing Ottomans, elephants, Eskimos, and Jesus. And then I started to put together how these images were produced in what we call the modern age, but by men with like a medieval mind, where everything was not only inaccurate but also symbolic. So things were images were not as we consider today, like representations of reality, but were symbolic. And this mixture gave origin to much of the way that Brazil was seen by European on the first century of its occupation, and the way we see ourselves, because this image is the image that became the image of Brazil, the first years of Brazil, central Brazil. So I've done a big research on this. Is the first images really taken in Brazil, showing Brazil, about when the Dutch occupied the country in the 6th, 17th century. This is already from the 19th century. So I've done a big research collecting all those images and looking at them not by it's just a traditional history point of view, nor from a traditional visual arts point of view, but from a designer point of view, like considering that they were created as a mixture of looking as a designer, like considering they were created as a mixture of culture, industry, economy, and past references. And there are many examples. So you have like the same image like being distorted a lot. I found many examples of it. I won't describe all of them. And then I created a book, a box of book, which is called Eight Trips to Brazil. The first book, the book I show as the first book printed in Brazil, it has different names because the original name has like 25 lines, but the most popular name of it is Two Trips to Brazil. And then I applied Eight Trips to Brazil. And it's a box set with 8 books with this research mixed with different occupations of a book. So for each book, each of the 8 books, I've played a different role. So in the first, I have written a fiction narrative using the original woodcuts. On the second is the research, is the thicker one, and is the research, the historical research itself. The third, I just acted as a designer. I took the original text, the original ornaments, and designed it, put together. The fourth is a visual essay on Brazil past leaders, if we can call them leaders. The fifth is a torn book. The sixth is the guy, the German guy. He had been captive close to the beach in a place where today we have a beach resort called Ubatuba. And then I thought, 500 years of like struggling to end like Ubatuba. So I've created on the sixth volume, I took pictures of current Ubatuba to illustrate the text from the 16th century. On the seventh volume, I compared both, compared some images. It's back to the historical research. And in the eighth volume, it's a fictional narrative with skyscraper photographs from all around the world and an old comics I've drawn when I was 12. The book became an exhibition. We made some posters. And for me, this is the kind of project, even though I tried to explain it quickly because of the reasons that I explained before. But this is the kind of project that for me, I'm interested in introducing graphic design. Because for me, it's a project that involves history, fiction, written fiction, exhibitions and posters, images, many things that what I use to put all of them together is graphic design. And even in areas where you don't see the traditional graphic design appearing. This is another project, similar project, but not about Brazil, but about illuminated medieval books. I have tried to play with the idea of recreating these historiated initials from medieval manuscripts, but using, instead of using the Bible as the subject for the illustrations, using the contemporary words. So I created a set of decorated initials and filled with pictograms of, like, today were like guns and cars and cell phones and pills and we have created 3 sets, the uppercase only, A to Z, 3 sizes, modular sizes. So, and then when they were ready, I wrote a book, the Gospels. I rewrote the Gospels. Of course, it was not wasn't the Gospels by themselves, but I took the Gospel structures and the authors of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and exchanged Jesus for a cosmetic product, replaced Jesus by a cosmetic product, and made them, each of them, write a release of this product, and created the book was designed like the medieval Bible, where the initials, they played the same functions the medieval one played. So they were initials, like functional marks for text, but they also decorated the book. So it's a box set, and the book is like a gold medal cover with not so precious stones. But again, even though it's a different project from the Brazilian, the eight trips to Brazil, it's the same principle of putting together the visual culture history, play with visual culture history, like I said. There is a historical book that comes together with this like cosmetic release. This is the historical book. But so put together history, contemporary design, and fiction, and multiple languages all together in one project. Uh, this is another one, a different one. I also uh, more and more I start to use the idea of creating a book and writing a book. And for me, writing today is not writing words. It's just when I say writing words, images, and the object itself. So everything for me is writing a book. Or if someone asks me, what are you doing? I say, I'm writing a book. I can be either writing words or designing a book. I'm writing a book. And also to any question I have, anything that interested me, I can put it into a book, make into a book. I was traveling to the northeast area of Brazil. It's Sertão. It's called Sertão. It's traditionally known as a poor area from Brazil. It's a very hot and desert-like vegetation. It's called Caatinga. And I've never been there. I don't know why, but I was going to travel to Sertão, and a couple of months ago, all the friends that I told that I was going to travel to Sertão, they told, you must read a book about this popular houses of Sertão. They are wonderful. And I found this book. It was a book that shows houses like this, popular houses built until 1960, which were built by the local population without any architect, an engineer, or anything, and they try to use colors and different like roofs. I don't know, roofs not the name, but you got the position. Roofs to achieve some kind of individuality. And today, these houses, they are all of them are already seen as culture. That's the culture. They have the culture stamp. And so I went to Sertão I said, we'll find many of these houses. And when I arrived there, I found this kind of things, which are houses that are the popular houses, but not from the past, from today, that people use like bathroom, that ceramics originally designed for bathroom floor linings, for example, to decorate their homes. And it was very, very, very they don't have the culture stamp at all. They do not like say, oh, you can like it. It's already assimilated as culture. On the contrary, it's something of very bad taste. And then I got puzzled. I said, okay, but I went here to see something that I would like. I said, okay, deep Brazil, popular culture. I didn't find it, but I find the same thing executed in a contemporary version, but this same thing in a contemporary version is exactly the opposite. It's something that say you cannot like it. I was not supposed to like it. And then I said, what will I do? What do I do now? Should I like that? Should I dislike that? What do I do? And then as I said, I say I will do a book. So I started to photograph all of them. Not only there are not only the linings, but they build like huge walls. Even if the house was poor and small, it'd be like very huge walls. And I thought, oh, violence all across the country, spread all across the country. But after talking to some of the local people, they said, no, that's not, no, violence is not that bad. So the walls, they were more symbolic than like real protection. So everything was very, very far from what I in São Paulo, which is the biggest city in Brazil, and say that it's a very cosmopolitan city and consider as popular culture. And so I took a lot of pictures and wrote an essay, not trying to answer the question, but trying to put the question. So what how do we, as pretensely sophisticated people, see popular culture? Are we really seeing what happens, or are we seeing what we want to see the way we want to see it? So the book is about it. So for me, again, if you say, oh, it's not a graphic design project, but for me, it's a project that revolves around graphic design. Graphic design put everything together and helps me to broad what I consider as graphic design, as visual culture. This is another book on the same path. I this, from starting from the same issues, that when we see manifestations of popular culture from Brazil in its most central areas like São Paulo, do we really see as it is, or do we see just something that they prepare us to see, to the things that we are already considering, okay, this is popular Brazil? And for this project specifically, I wanted to check if there was a relation. Is there a relation between the visual language, something that is executed, and what the object? So we have like an image that popular culture is manually executed, and everything that is digitally executed is not like traditional anymore. And I had to check the relation. If does this relation still exist or not? So I picked a city that I hasn't been before, a city in the north, in the Amazon, a small city that I haven't been before, and there without any specific like attraction. And the city was called São Francisco do Pará. And I went there for the first time and tried to portray the whole city, the whole commercial signage of the city. So I took pictures of all its commercial signs. That's why the city needs to be small, because I need to do it in like one day. Uh, and created a book without classifying them, just put all of them together. And these two projects, they, instead of trying to answer things, they try to make questions more complex. They propose questions, not answers. And for me, this is something this is a direction where I'm trying to move my design activity. Instead of considering graphic design as a problem solver, like you have a problem, I will bring you the visual solution, like designer, like the classical designer task. uh, I believe that graphic design can also create interesting problems, even if I cannot find the solution. And I don't know that I cannot find. I don't believe that I need to find a solution. Sometimes I believe that today it's more important to build new questions rather than try to answer old questions. It's something that I sometimes see that discussions about graphic design are trying to do, to answer questions from a world that doesn't exist anymore. So I've created this book, which is a book like it's a big poster. You can see the big poster showing like I've designed it as an like the old road maps when you traveled without the, like self when there were no Waze or Google Maps. You have these old maps, travel maps. So it's you open and the overall idea was to avoid any highlight or any classification, anything that would filter some content that I would consider, oh, that's very interesting, very popular, very funny, than those that are clearly something that I very like a stock image, like a Spasso fashion with a crown, obviously stock image, a digital stock image. And it was not easy because I had to like not to highlight this kind of thing. For me, it's just very funny. It's a funerary and optic establishment. I don't know why they were together. Like you can go to see if you're looking good, and if you're not feeling well, you can ask for a coffee. And the method was a coffin, say, it was something very interesting that my natural tendency was to highlight it somehow, to put it like big and say, oh, look at it, the coffin, say, come here, I'm ready for you. But I prefer to avoid this and to create this panel, and the reader can consider by itself if the conclusions or if there are any conclusions. So, and there is another. So these projects, they are projects that I consider more focused in exploring and understanding visual culture as something broader than I had learned as the visual universe of a graphic designer. So even if I'm playing with historical uh, things like old woodcuts and medieval manuscripts, or am I looking at like urban landscapes or commercial things in the city and putting them together in a book? For me, all of them are working under like the what I call research on visual culture, even if the research are not very like academic. Yeah. But the other side of what I do is exactly what people usually say, okay, but this is not design, is to push what I call the limits of language. So projects, books that I create, I write, yeah, words and images, trying to play with the cultural structures that are so established in our life, in our history, that we do not see them anymore as cultural structures. We consider them almost as natural things. So once I was talking to a friend, and she told me that she read Italo Calvino's novel. It's a famous novel. Probably many of you have read. If it's called If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. It's a novel where each chapter the story changes itself. So, and in a certain point you don't know which book you are reading anymore. And she told me, oh, I read this book. They remind me of your work. I got very pissed off. I said, okay, it's a you got pissed off. I'm a member of me. I said, yes. But anyway, I reread the book, and in fact, it's a very interesting book. But as Calvino uses only written verbal language, only words, you can see that to change from one chapter to transform the story from one chapter to another, he has to use a few strategies that you can discover. It's not easy, but if you're looking for them, you can find the strategies he uses. And then I thought, oh, but if I use the shapes of of book categories we have in mind, I could I could make the same thing without using any resource, just changing the form. If I just change the form into like different book categories, I could immediately make the reader get completely lost in the book he was reading without any other strategy, without any visible strategy. And that's what I've done. So it's easy for you to hear with these 4 books to point which one is the children book, which one is the cheap romantic book, which one is the artist book, which one is the adult novel. I believe no one will have difficult in pointing at each one of them. And but this is the book I've written, so it's the same book. It's called BB, and you start with the BB, and you have the impression that it's a children's book just because of its form, because there's nothing else saying that it's a children's book, apart from delivering you a message that I look like all the other children's book you have read before. So consider me a children's book. But then the book transforms itself, saying, no, 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 I'm not a children's book. I'm an adult book, illustrated but adult. So you see, I have sex, I have drugs, I have like abstract graphics. So I'm not a children's book. Uh, Okay, so but then then it transforms itself again and become a novel, and the text transforms itself to become a serious novel. And at a certain point, the serious novel goes back to the cover and the title, which is BB, which is a very childish name, and say, "Come on, I cannot be my title cannot be BB. I'm a serious book. So please detach this and go to the title and replace the title, change the title, please." So the book not only, the reader not only get lost in the history he's reading, but he don't know even the title. The title of the book changes and then moves to like a romantic or cheap novel to an artist book and it changes the name again. So the artist book say, "Oh, that name is very bad for me. I'm quite contemporary. Please use something more subjective." As just 3 points, and then so this is the idea of the book is that using design as a tool, as a narrative tool. So to be able to do that, I do not follow the traditional path that first you write the content and then you design it. So design is not only part of the content in the usual way, but it is built together. So that here we have like the words, you have the illustrations, and you have design. They together they divide the work to be done. So here the graphic design is the element that commands the whole thing, including the reader confusion. This is another one that plays with the idea that books that are beautiful or big, they are meant to be seen, but not to be read. To be, and then I created a book, which is like a traditional book, text, only text, not a single drawing. Numbers indicating the chapters, the segments. But instead of printing in a codex, I printed in napkins and like dining stuff. So placemats, and more than that, I call it that it was not a book; it was a narrative dining set, and it was like we produced some promo pictures of the book being used in a pasta session, a very wild pasta session, and and we and I played when the book was launched, saying that you could read or you could use it in your dinner. You can do both. You can dine and read, and you can. It was of course that it was. I was mocking many things, but when it was launched, no one paid attention. And anyway, only two culinary magazines give some small notes saying now you can dine with literature. So these are the pictures of the book we're using. And this is another one. I've created another narrative. I'm running out of time. Uh, Another narrative, 10 chapters, printed on paper again, and but that was sent to that were not sold in bookstores or bound together. They were sent to 9,000 people as direct mail. So 10 chapters, each week one chapter, sent to 9,000 people. None of them had asked to, so they received it without asking. And worse and most important, they didn't know what it was. So they received it one at home. They received it like a leaflet saying, "Valfrido, you bastard, you bastard," calling a guy named Valfrido, saying he was a bastard. And then the next week, you find out that Valfrido's wife was accusing him of cheating and beating her and etc. And then Valfrido's partner appears on the third week saying, "Oh, Valfrido, we had like a transport car. I don't know the name in English. I'm sorry. And you made me glued all these posters in the streets to promote our company, but then I found out that there was no phone number, so the clients could never reach us. And then I said, "Oh, if someone is receiving a direct mail at home saying, no, there is a guy complaining about a poster, about specific poster, he describes the yellow poster, why?" And people, people don't know what it is. Why don't do I effectively produce the posters and put on the street so people will receive the direct mail, and when goes down to work or to find the poster, so we created uh, a book that people didn't know it was a fiction narrative, and at a certain point it started to happen not only in the printed direct mail that they receive it each week, but also on the streets as posters or like uh, nonsense promotions. And it was very fun. It was very funny experiment because, of course, that I couldn't check any reaction because part of it was keep the mystery. So people need to still don't understand what was that, if it is was it fiction, because it's something interesting. If you don't say, "Oh, this is fiction, this is a propaganda, this is," uh, if you don't classify something, it's almost like people don't know what to do. And that's what Valfrido is all about. Valfrido is the name of the project. So I didn't know what they were like, how they were reacting to that. After 8 months after the direct mail adventure ended, I launched a book telling the story, telling the whole story. And then when the book was announced, then I heard of very funny stories of like buildings that everyone made a meeting to decide if they call the police or not to investigate Alfredo. People that thought that was art, people that thought that was some kind of performance, people that thought that was some service being sold, people that knew some of Frido and thought that it was something like a stalker. There were many different reactions that to the project just because they were not told in advance how they should consider that. Valfrido is the classic, and we made a video telling this whole story. Valfrido is, for me, is the classic case of a project that every time I present, people say, okay, but this is not designed. Once, but Valfrido is worse because I said, okay, it's not designed. And a week after the first person said to me, "This is not design," which is a design audience. I went to a literature event to give a lecture to a literature audience and presented Valfrido. And the first question, okay, but this is not literature. So okay, this is not design, this is not literature, so it's art. And I applied for an art event, and then the curator wrote me, "But is it art?" This is the final one. I know I have like just 5 minutes left. I wrote a book that makes it a fictional narrative with the story of the Dove's Press, which probably many of you know. It's got Thomas James Cobden Sandero, Emery Walker. They built a private press in the turn of the 19th to 20th century. They both worked together with William Morris. After Morris died, they started Dove's Press, which was one of the most important private presses of the movement. You have this, which is a famous piece of graphic work. It's the beginning of the Bible, and they had the famous fight for the Dove types that made Cobden Sanderson throw away all the punches and matrix and metal types of the typeface they have designed together to avoid Emery Walker from using it after he passed away. So this story, which is a typographical story, was one of the two stories being told on the book. The other was a fiction novel about losing a son. Uh, and as in the book, the they alternate. I wanted to illustrate the Dubs Press part with like pictures of the type of the punches and with both of them, but I didn't want to insert the illustrations printed on the book because otherwise the book would become almost like a classical nonfiction book, and I didn't want to. So I made them like separate cards and created a visual narrative of the bridge where from where Cobden Sanderson threw all the types away during 2 or 3 years and put into a box. And but for the cover, I want something that combined life and death, beauty and ugliness. So I bought some dead insects and put them manually in some resin globes, produced it manually, some resin globes, and apply it to the box cover. The box cover, we have recreated one of Cobden Sanderson motifs. He was a famous binder. He was the Kelmscott Press official binder. So we mixed the dead bugs with and created this. So this is the book. All of these books and other books, they are together in, I put together in an exhibition that I held 2 years ago. And this is the book cover, which is a playful book cover as well. So you can fold and unfold and make it wrong or make it right. And this is the exhibition. And I also have a lot of other books. So this is a collection. I have 1 minute. There's a collection of books that I take some 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 designer or writer or or book or anything that I consider that deserves more attention and write a small book about it. It's called My Private Graphic Collection. This is another book about Brazil's election. I won't talk about that because we don't have that. This is a children's book I've made with my son, starting from his drawings and from his annoying uh, days where he only said no to everything. This is a book talking about São Paulo, graphic novels. Anyway, this is it. I know that I'm out of time. Anyway, I believe that for me today, being a graphic designer, much more than like solving problems that someone pays me to solve, like in a traditional way. Besides, I still do that. I still do commercial work, but more than that, I'm trying to find new ways of using my skills as graphic designer to try to find new ways of creating things, putting things together. So I do not have an answer. I do not have like, okay, I found it. Probably I will never find like an answer. Say, okay, I found it. This is how I'm working as a graphic designer, but I'm not really worried to find it quickly. I'm quite comfortable in exploring graphic design in out of the limits I was told that a graphic designer should stay within. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Gustavo, thank you so much for sharing some of your culture with us. We have a couple questions. I'm going to read the first question, and Bernardo, I'll ask you to take the others. So the first question is from Kevin Thompson. Over the past several decades, I have found graphic design education in English-speaking countries to be more homogenized and narrow in scope. In contrast, the rest of the world seems to be much more encouraging of students' broader interests, teaching graphic design on an even footing with product design, architecture, urban planning, and traditional fine arts, for instance. Do you see a similar difference when you look at contemporary design?
I believe that here I cannot say for the US. I have no knowledge enough to answer for the US. But here in Brazil, for example, over the past 20 years, the education, the of graphic design, it narrowed. Like it started to become a more specialized education than it was like 20, 30 years ago. And personally, I see that now, for me, I see the damage it's causing in the students that are graduating right now, because our activity is essentially an activity that requires, of course, specific knowledge, different kinds of specific knowledge. But for me, it's as I describe myself, and probably it was on the presentation that Gigi described. For me, being a designer, graphic designer, is essentially being able to establish dialogues. And if I am restricted to a very specific word where everything people talk about is serif or sans serif or like grids, I won't be able to establish many dialogues. I'm very limited in terms of establishing dialogue. So I believe that here in Brazil, the education became more and more specialized to a point where the graphic designers, they can. It's very. Of course, that I don't know all the. I must be more careful. I don't know all the colleges. I'm not saying that every institution does that in Brazil, but as per my observation, in general, graphic designers are not being stimulated to think about the words. They are they are stimulated to think about discussions like, "Did you like the new Burger King logo?" That's it.
Okay, Bernardo, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, so we have a few more questions. I think we have time for one more. Victor asks, how do you personally describe the Alfredo project? In your point of view, this was a design, art, literature, or all of them? How do you define design in this sense?
Yeah, I believe that I'm comfortable in considering Valfredo as a project that summarizes my how can I say? I'm searching to get rid of the definitions, to get rid of the definitions. So for me, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if even if it's a book, even the publishing house don't know how to. They call it on their website. They call it like literary urban postal experiment. It's like something that's I don't know how to call it. I will make a big description. But I believe that today we are more and more uh, categorized. You know, everything is. So for me, for my personal mental health and for my life, so of course I believe that it's something that it's important to be spread. Something it's important message to be spread, but mainly it's something that I do for my life, for my personal life, for my personal happiness, for my personal fulfillment, is to complicate things rather than try to simplify, to categorize things, to be easily consumed. And I believe that the more I complicate things, the more I create things that even I don't know exactly how to call it, the more I create things that when I try to explain that they seem absurd, the better. Because maybe things got too easy to be classified and bought and sold, and something was lost in this movement. So maybe if a graphic designer, for me, see itself just as a problem solver, maybe he is condemned to only work for business, to send invoice, solve problems, send invoice, solve problems. And for me, if this was intended to be the activity, I prefer to be other thing more profitable, like to have like a gas station.
So we have a couple more questions, but we're already past time. So, oh no, don't apologize.
I promised Gigi and Bernardo that I would end 12:20. 12:20. They told me I said like 5 times. No, 12:20. I'm done. I'm done.
That's okay. We liked listening to you, so that that was enjoyable. But we're going to end it here. I'm sure people have jobs to get back to. And Gustavo, I just want to thank you for your insight and for sharing, so much about your work and culture.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you everybody for coming.